Shields up, Ironbreakers, and welcome to my Monster Hunter Wilds review. Over the last couple of days I've been playing the game and I've put around 55 hours into it. During that time I engaged in what I would consider to be a more critical path type of playthrough. I did deviate from the main path from time to time in order to make my set and to explore certain portions of the game, but the reason why I went for a critical path playthrough is because I wanted to save some things to discover on stream with you guys, because that's just where I'm going to be having the most fun with the game, because I always looked at my review save as kind of like a temporary thing, because I want to be experiencing everything alongside you guys, and that's going to be the playthrough where I'm going to be taking my time to smell the roses and do all of that. But I still wanted to play through the game so that I could give you guys my opinion on it in this video. Now, naturally, as you can imagine, this title was provided to me by Capcom so that I could give it a look and tell you guys my opinions on it. So let's start by talking about Monster Hunter. For those of you that might be completely new here and you're just like, oh, what is this Monster Hunter Wilds game? Seems to be pretty popular. Everybody's talking about it. So Monster Hunter is a game where you go and you hunt monsters, as the name implies, but the objective is going to be for you to, hunt these monsters, collect parts from them, and then you craft better armor and weapons that then allows you to go and hunt stronger monsters, and then the cycle repeats until you run out of monsters to hunt. And that usually will take you quite a bit of time. This time around, there's also a little bit more focus on the story elements of the game, which we are going to be talking about, but fundamentally this is the idea. Third-person action game, hunt monsters, collect their materials, craft their gear, hunt tougher monsters. And this is the 6th generation title when it comes to the Monster Hunter franchise. Now, whenever there's a generational leap, it's kind of a big deal because there are going to be things that are going to be different from previous versions of Monster Hunter. And so, in this case, when it comes to Monster Hunter Wilds, the main differences from what you would have experienced in a previous title, like, say, Monster Hunter World, would be there is a bigger focus on the narrative during the campaign. And I know that for some veterans of the series, you might be thinking like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that because, I like the whole thing about hunting, right? But once you are done with the campaign, things kind of like revert back to what you expect from Monster Hunter. You're going around hunting monsters, collecting their gear, making your sets, doing all of that stuff. Having said that, at any point during the campaign, you can kind of just like put the brakes and go like, hey, I feel like going to grind now, and then you can go and you can grind, you can go smell the roses, you can go gather stuff, you can do whatever you want. Another thing that I would consider to be one of the main differences in Monster Hunter Wilds is that there is a much bigger focus on the world and in immersion, making things kind of like seamless, like you just go from your town hub or the village or whatever it is that you happen to be and you go into the hunting field and you go hunt monsters and it's all seamless, there's no loading screens, none of that. Now, when you actually get a little bit further ahead in the game, you are eventually going to be hopping from different locale to different locale, and that will involve loading screens. But, the whole game feels like it has a much more natural flow to it. Now, when it comes to the hunting action, it is still phenomenal, and I personally absolutely love the game, which shouldn't really be a surprise. I tend to really just enjoy all Monster Hunter games. It's kind of like my thing. So, yeah, I love it. To continue down this intro, I figured let's go ahead and just instantly talk about some of the main criticisms that I had for the game. And one of the biggest ones is that I expected the monster roster to be bigger. Another one is that I feel like performance is still not where it needs to be, and I'm hoping to see some improvements, but then again, we still don't have stuff like updated drivers for some of the GPUs and all of that stuff, because as I'm recording this video, we're still in the review period, so those have not come out. I'm hoping that some more optimization will happen before the actual release, but this is what I have to work with right now. The other thing is I still wanted more challenge, but then again, at the end of the day, being a veteran, I'm always going to want more challenge. But I will say I did get one of my wishes, which, if you guys remember, I said multiple times, man, I wish I would cart in low rank, and I did. So that made me pretty happy. So now let's talk about things in a little bit more detail. Usually I like to start by talking about visuals. In my opinion, I think that the visuals of the game are very good, assuming that you have a good enough rig to run them. The version of the game that I've played is the PC version, so I'm going to be getting into specifics about my hardware and all of that stuff. But I know there's going to be people here that are from the PlayStation 5 side of things. I did do a preview event where I played on a PlayStation 5 in performance mode. If you guys check out my preview footage, there's like gameplay for 3 of the monster hunts. That'll give you an idea of what to expect for performance for the PlayStation 5. I'm assuming that considering that the version that I played there was a version for the preview event, things can only get better from there. That would be my expectation, but like I said, I haven't played the PlayStation version of the game. I haven't played the Xbox version. I've just played the PC version. Now, in terms of visuals, in my rig, the game is running like super smooth. The visuals look absolutely fantastic, except in one very specific type of content, which is during dialogue scenes. Now, when I play the game, I've been playing with FSR3 because I have an AMD 7900 XTX, and I'm playing with FSR3 set to quality, so I am using upscaling as well as frame generation. I'll talk more about that in the performance section, but just to give you guys an idea of the settings that I'm running and all that stuff, I have everything maxed out, but FSR3, upscaling, and frame generation. And so during these dialogue scenes the game has, which the game has cinematics, but then it also has these dialogue scenes where you're interacting with other characters and you get to like select little bits of dialogue and there's a conversation between the two characters, which is different from a standard cinematic, which is better animated and stuff is happening and all that. During these dialogue scenes, I felt like the detail on my armor was not as good as I would have liked, so that's a little bit of a ding there when it comes to the visuals, but that is being a little nitpicky, I will admit. Now, I've also been informed by the team that there is a 4K texture pack that is going to be released on the actual release of the game. So during the review period, we did not have access to this 4K texture pack, so I'll have to see how things improve on that end once that actually releases, and I'm going to be streaming the game so you can come and check it out if you want to know my opinion about it at that point. Now, not everybody will notice this because I did do a podcast with Cowboy, which will probably be going live tomorrow. He didn't notice it as much as I did, but that could be due to the fact that he is running the game on an NVIDIA GPU, and DLSS is superior to FSR3, as I'm sure most people will be aware. So therefore, he was playing in DLSS quality, I think. So therefore, things might have looked better to him, but in me, I noticed the little thing about the armor. Now, beyond that, cinematics and the performance of the characters are absolutely fantastic. I love them. Animation, as per usual, whenever it comes to the Monster Hunter team, they are the best in the business as far as I'm concerned, both from a cinematic standpoint as well as a gameplay standpoint. I always love their animation work. They do fantastic stuff. In terms of sounds, they've done a fantastic job. I love the sound of all of the combat impacts. I mostly use the gun lance, as you can imagine, and I love the sound of the big explosions, the sound of wounds popping up. You can usually even tell when a wound is about to come up if you pay close attention to the sound, which is always a good thing. I also love, obviously, monster roars, the sounds of their attacks. Everything sounds absolutely fantastic. But one of the big standouts is obviously the soundtrack. The soundtrack is just phenomenal this time around. From the action tracks themselves, when you are fighting the monsters, they feel really good, really tense, fantastic. And when you're in town, it's just so chill. I love the sounds that they put in the music when you're in town is just so good. I absolutely love it. I mean, there's a reason I even have like a playlist of some of the tunes that we picked up in the beta and stuff like that. I have that in the channel because I just enjoy all of that so much. In terms of voice acting, I feel that the voice acting is solid. However, I do have a little bit of a criticism, and once again, we go back to those dialogue scenes that I mentioned earlier, and that is that during those dialogue scenes, I feel like there are some pauses, which I'm not sure if that was made because of localization, because maybe in Japanese it takes them a little bit longer to say the stuff, but there are some pauses that make the conversation not feel as organic, which sounds very different from the rest of the game. So the delivery and the performance of the actors is solid, but the pacing of the dialogue gets a little bit weird from time to time. Now, you can press like a button when you're done listening to the dialogue, and you press like on X and it moves on to the next dialogue, but that also causes animation skips in the characters, and it's a little bit weird. I feel like that is a point where they could tighten up a couple of things, but then again, this is something that the Monster Hunter team hasn't really tackled before, other than I think the Witcher quest line that they've done for the Witcher collab in Monster Hunter World. There really aren't a lot of scenes where you're going like through dialogue menus and getting additional information, and there's a lot of that here. And I love those dialogue scenes because the fact that you do get additional context into the game, which is optional. You don't have to like, oh, let me go through all of the dialogue options. I do because I like that, but I understand there is usually an option that you can just pick if you're like, oh, I just want to keep going. You pick that option, they just, they keep going. But I love the fact that they're giving you this extra dialogue stuff because it gives you more lore stuff about Monster Hunter. And obviously, I think that historians are going to love that aspect of it. So now let's get into the performance side of things. And this is actually one of the more negative aspects of the game. Now, the game definitely runs better than it did in the beta, which is one of the concerns that the community had. I remember when the beta initially came out, everybody was like, oh my God, this is actually the final performance that we're getting. There's going to be no improvements whatsoever. And no, I would say that the final game runs significantly better than the beta, but in my view, it still needs improvement. Now, there's a limited pool of hardware that I can pull from, and one of the rigs that I wanted to run was my Rathalos rig, which runs like a 2060. It's a super low end rig, my super old rig. But if you guys remember, I recently replaced that with another computer, and turns out I did it just in time because I've been trying to boot that rig for the last 4 days without success. It's not like I'm sitting there trying to figure it out. I know what the problem is. It's got like a problem in the motherboard and whatnot. And anyway, I don't want to get into that. Let's just say I wasn't able to test on the 2060 like I wanted to. Now, on the 7900 XTX, the game runs silky smooth, no issues. Like I said, I am using upscaling and frame generation, which is not something that I'm happy about. So, like I said, in my opinion, performance still not there. I would like to see further performance improvements. But having said that, FSR3 set to quality, frame generation, silky smooth, 4K, 7900 XTX. Now on the 6900 XT, which is another GPU that I have access to, I was also able to run the game in both these cases, I'm running above 100 FPS in most situations. And on the 6900 XT, I was running FSR3, but rather than running it on quality, I was running it on balanced, and I lowered the shadows a little bit, lowered a couple of settings, tweaked instead of having everything maxed out. And I was also getting really good performance, which was surprising because usually Team Red are the ones that are getting shafted in terms of, issues and performance problems and all of that stuff. But on my end, things have been fairly smooth, which is interesting because in the discussion that I had with Cowboy, he was telling me like he experienced some crashes related to frame gen and like some crazy mesh bleeding or whatever where the monster mesh just stretches out all over the place. I was like, no crashes on my 55 hours, no crazy bugs, nothing like that happened to me. So I was like, I'm looking good. So I also tested this on my other computer, which is running an Intel Arc B580. Yeah, that's rough. I was getting, I think, like 40 FPS or something like that, and usually going down into like 35, trying to run... I think I was trying to run 1080p at high-ish settings, but it didn't seem like there was a massive change as I was fiddling with the settings. So I think that in that case, in that specific GPU, that is just something that either Intel needs to come out with some better drivers, or I don't know, more optimization needs to be done specifically for the Intel GPU. Because yeah, the Arc B580 was struggling. But then again, I didn't buy that GPU to play games. I bought that to encode AV1, and for that, it's working fine. But yeah, that's my view on performance. I know that this is going to be a hot button topic in the community. It's like, look, my advice to you is run the benchmark tool. That is likely going to be the closest thing that you have to test it. Pay particular attention to the scene where you're out in the field and it's actually the open field, it's actual gameplay instead of the cinematics, and that is the performance that you can expect when you are out there hunting monsters. And if it seems to you like that is not acceptable, then you should probably hold off. That's my view on the performance side of things. Now, let's talk a little bit about the story. I'm not going to get into any spoilers on this review whatsoever. And by the way, there's also quite a few embargo guidelines. So if you feel like, Rurikhan didn't talk about this specific thing, did he forget? Is he getting old? No, the embargo is just very, very restrictive, which is weird to me because it's like, I think the game is phenomenal, so I don't think you need it as much of a restricted embargo, but I think they're doing it to specifically prevent people from spoiling the story, because that's something that tends to happen with a lot of outlets that are a little bit less careful about the footage that they show and stuff like that. But you guys know the deal, right? So anyways, what can I tell you about this story? I'll tell you that it was a bold direction that they've taken with the story. Something that starts with a simple, hey, let's go explore the Forbidden Lands, actually takes quite a few unexpected twists and turns. And the thing about this is I don't think that the story is going to land with everyone. I've been thinking about it quite a bit after I finished it, and I think I've come to the conclusion that I kind of like it. I kind of like that they did this. This is going to be one of those things where the historians of Monster Hunter, the people that dig into the lore of Monster Hunter and all of that stuff, they're going to be scratching their heads for a while after they experience this story. That's my prediction, because I don't really cover the lore side of Monster Hunter nearly as much as other people in the community. But I think they're going to be talking about this game for quite some time, and I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be frustrated about it. But I will tell you what, I respect the fact that they were willing to just like, you know what, yeah, this is the story we're telling, let's friggin' go, it is what it is. Because as stuff was happening, I was just going, really? This is okay. I was very surprised with the direction that it takes. The pacing of the story is also very good, in my opinion. The overall pacing of the campaign, as you are experiencing the story, you're constantly going places and hunting different monsters and doing all this stuff. I found that it had very good pacing. There's never really a situation like what we had back in World, which was frustrating for a lot of people, where it's like, okay, we need to go gather some tracks to find a pink Rathian or something like that, right? So you don't really have that. And yeah, I like the pacing. It is going to be faster than you expect. Like, between you going from each locale, it goes by, like, you'll be at the third locale very, very fast, is what I'm getting at. And I think you guys will be surprised how fast you get there. That's not to say that there's not a lot of content. There is tons of stuff to do. And like I said, I skipped a bunch of optional quests that they showed and all of that stuff because I was trying to do more critical path. But yeah, there's tons of content to do, tons of stuff to engage in, particularly if you also enjoy like ecology and fishing and all that stuff. There's quests for doing all of those things. So yeah, basically the one thing that I would say is very few people come to Monster Hunter for the story, but I think that those who do enjoy the story, this is going to be one of those that you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. I don't know if there's going to be like a middle ground, but ultimately you're not here for the story, so let's talk about what you are here for, which is the gameplay. So the first thing that I have to say is that the structure of the game feels very different from previous Monster Hunter games, because and this is the biggest change that we have in Monster Hunter Wilds. Both the story quests and the hunts, they kind of like float together in a very organic way. If you think about Monster Hunter games, the gameplay loop has always kind of been, you prepare, you eat, you hunt, and then you repeat. And somewhere in the middle of there, you're also going to be crafting your sets and doing all of that stuff. But that's kind of like the gameplay loop, right? You do your preparation in town, you get like your consumables in order. Okay, I'm good. You eat your canteen meal, then you go on a hunt, and then you keep repeating this. Unless you're doing guiding lands, then you're kind of like staying there for a little bit longer and you keep hunting and doing all of that. But the essential experience of Monster Hunter has always been kind of like that. Now, it's very different. You're just flowing through the story, and you're just like going from cinematic to hunt to NPC interaction to maybe dialogue interaction to another hunt to another cinematic, and everything just kind of flows like a more traditional action adventure game. I would say that's kind of like the overall vibe that the team seems to start going. There's even several sections where you're straight up just mounted on Sacred and it's on rails. And they do allow you to do a little bit of gathering with the slinger while you're doing these sections. So you can be like, oh, a mushroom, while stuff is happening and dialogue is happening and you're talking to Alma or some other NPC. You're like, doing your investigation stuff. But you're basically on Sacred and it's a little bit on rails. These don't really overstay their welcome. Like, there's a lot of games where they do overstay their welcome, and I do feel that for the people that usually like to zoom through the game, they might feel that way. But I felt that the pacing was pretty reasonable in terms of, oh, here's a little bit of section where you're talking with the NPCs, learning about this particular area, doing these things. And while you're doing that, you're like, oh, a mushroom. Oh, honey. Oh, this thing. And you're collecting stuff. But it does get frustrating sometimes because, like, I would see a mining node and I was like, oh, can I dismount real quick? The mining node, it's staying back. No. So that did happen from time to time, but it's not like there's a million of these things that are going to be happening, right? Now I know that at this point there's going to be a lot of people that are also going to be curious. Okay, but how does it work in multiplayer? Do we have to do the thing that we did in World where somebody goes in the quest and then they see the cutscene, then they do an SOS and all? No. It's not like that, but it's also not seamless. So I tested this with Cowboy actually earlier today because I didn't do any multiplayer up until this point, pretty much. I've just been running around and doing everything in single player and experiencing the game that way. And so I was like, hey, Cowboy, I really want to test this thing. So I was able to wrangle him to come test this with me. And so we both started brand new characters and we go up to like the first quest where you can actually co-op. And what happens is if you're in a link party with somebody else, which is what you want to be doing if you're playing with friends, when you are experiencing the story and you're doing the things that are not hunt related. So like, oh, I'm doing this thing where I'm hanging out with these NPCs and I need to go collect something or I need to do something. While you're in those moments or during cinematics or whatever, you're in your own instance, but you're still in a party with somebody else. And then whenever one of you gets to a point where it's like, okay, I've started a quest, then your character will automatically send an invite to everybody in your link party for that quest. And then they can join you. They can talk to their version of Alma and go like, oh, I want to join this. Or there's even like a little pop-up that says, hey, this person invited to a quest. And you can just open that and join instantly. And so if you are both at the same progress point, which in our case we were hunting a specific monster that you're supposed to do early in the game. And the quest pops up for both of us. And then I forget if I joined Cowboy or Cowboy joined me, it doesn't matter. Because then we hunted that monster and the progress counted to both of us, and then it basically kicked us back to our instance. The party is still active, so we're still in the link party, but we each go back to our instance and we continue experiencing the story. So technically speaking, if you want to do like a full campaign playthrough with a friend, from this very just like testing in one monster, I'm assuming that you're able to do that for the whole campaign. It's just whenever you're doing non-hunt things, you're in your instance, and then when you eventually get to a hunt, it sends out invitations to your friends, and so long as you're all on the same progression point of the quest, you can join each other and you can finish the quest, and that would be what I would expect for that. So still not as seamless as I know a lot of us would like, but a whole lot better than it was with Monster Hunter World. So it is what it is. Now, when it comes to this change in structure that I talked about earlier in this section, it felt very weird to me at the start. Because due to the fact that my brain still formatted for that whole, I stock my stuff, I eat, and then I go hunt, I constantly forgot to restock my material. So I would be going, oh, I did this hunt. Now I have this cutscene, and now we're off to do something else, and now I'm in another hunt. And then suddenly I'd be hunting a monster, and it'd be like, oh, I only have 2 mega potions. Oops. Messed that up. So it takes a little bit of adjusting for you to remember that, oh, right, I need to go restock because I just did like 3 hunts in a row, and now I'm out of consumables. So that was something that is weird. The other thing is the food buff, because the way that the food buff works now is if you do your cooking thing, then you get 50 minutes of the food buff. But if you're not paying attention, you're going to run out midway through the quest, and then your health is like, boop, you lost your food buff. And it's like, ah! Then you have to very quickly grab like a well-done steak and recover your health, because that's a very easy way to do it. Or if the monster runs away, you can whoop out the BBQ and you can cook something right there wherever you happen to be and get your food buff back. On the food buff, I was also kind of disappointed about the canteen. I'm probably going to bring that up a little bit later again, but there's no canteen in the game, which I was like, oh, man. But once you kind of like get used to the new flow of things, everything just feels very organic. You're just like going through the motions, doing all of your hunting, and whether you're doing the actual mainline quest or you're just doing like a grinding quest, you're going to be looking for monsters. You're going to be like, oh, there's a monster right there, and that's actually one of the ones that I need. I'm going to go hunt it. Maybe I need a couple of materials here. I'm going to pick up a couple of a couple of mining nodes, something like that. And you can be doing that midway through the campaign, or you can actively just go like, okay, that's enough of the campaign for now. I want to take a break here, and I want to go hunt, or I want to go and I want to go gather. Do all of that stuff. Because you can stop the campaign anytime that you want. However, do keep one thing in mind. Whenever you embark on the main quest, be prepared to hunt, which is something that I often would forget. I'd be like, oh, yeah, right, I gotta go talk to Alma for the next step in the main quest. And I wouldn't even prepare. I'd just go talk to her. And so it's like, oh, now I'm fighting this monster with 3 mega potions. Oops. This happened very, very often. So there is a bit of an adaptation period to the new flow of the gameplay, or maybe you guys will do just fine and not make the mistakes that I've made, but I'm just saying, my experience, I made a lot of mistakes. Now, when it comes to the actual hunting action, whenever you are fighting monsters and doing your thing, absolutely peak. Feels absolutely phenomenal. I love it. It's one of those things where I'm obviously still in the honeymoon phase, and it might change over time, but right now it's my favorite Monster Hunter experience, period. Like, I've done so many cool things, like I'd be fighting some flying wyvern or whatever. It comes in, swoops at me. I'll do like a perfect block, do a counter slam as it's flying by, and then sometimes I'll be able to weave in like a stake as it's flying by, and then it flies by me, and I just like turn around, wyvern fire, bam, shoot it down from the sky. It's just, oh my god, bro, I was losing my mind on so many of these hunts. I absolutely love it. By the way, during these 55 hours, so far, I have only played the Gunlance. And a lot of people are going to be like, Rurikhan, you can equip 2 weapons. Why are you only playing the Gunlance? Because playing the Gunlance is almost like playing 3 weapons, okay? I know that it's the same moveset, but shelling styles make different things. And I'm still learning all the 3 different shelling styles. Let me have fun with my weapon, okay? And tell you what, when I start my live streams, guess what weapon I'm going to be using again? The Gunlance. I love the Gunlance implementation on this so much, bro. It's insane. I'm brutally addicted to it. Absolutely. I love the impact. Like, we had some hit stops complaints during the beta. You're not getting those here. There is no, it's so good. The impact feels fantastic. Overall, the combat is just absolute peak. The clashes, the combos that you get to do with your, at least for my weapon, like I said, I've only played Gunlance. I've spoken to Cowboy about the other weapons. He's been having a blast. He's been playing every weapon under the sun. But yeah, the combos feel good. The clashes feel phenomenal. The whole thing where the monster comes at you and I hold up my shield and then I reload the Gunlance, blast it up in his face. I didn't get to do offsets, so I'm not going to comment on offsets, but every time that I see a clip that's posted anywhere with people doing offsets, I'm like, oh, that looks so good. Phenomenal. Love it. And the whole combat does feel very organic because of just how everything flows, how open the world is, all of the traps that are available for you to pull from. Everything just feels fantastic. The roster of monsters, in terms of like the diversity of monsters that you have available to hunt, also feels very good, even if, like I've mentioned earlier, I expected the roster to feature more monsters. That is one of the things that I've mentioned, and I'll keep mentioning. I expected there to be more monsters. As I unlocked more locales, another thing that I noticed is that I was changing the way that I play the game. So like in Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak, obviously you'd be doing optional quests whenever you're farming, because that's the only way to properly farm. Or you can go on expeditions or whatever, but usually you target monsters through quests, you go to the quest to do the thing. You can do optional quests in here, but you usually don't want to do that because you can get better rewards by just hunting them out in the open world. So basically going on expeditions, except in here, it's not really considered going on an expedition as much as just like, oh, I'm going to leave the village and go into the world and go hunt something. And usually you want to do that instead of doing the optionals because of the fact that those monsters will give you additional rewards. And that is how you end up, at least how I ended up doing most of my hunting as I got progressed further and further into the game. Rather than going to an optional quest list, I would just be like, oh, is any of the monsters that I want to hunt available right now? And you can also advance time. You can use points to like advance time, and you can advance to different seasons. So say, oh, I feel like playing in the Plenty right now. You can advance to Plenty. Oh, I feel like playing in Inclemency right now. You can advance to Inclemency, but it costs you points, guild points. Which is not like a massive amount, like a prohibitive amount. Everybody that I've spoken to is constantly like cycling through it. I purposely haven't done that because I enjoy the immersion of feeling like, oh, I can only hunt these things right now. This is what is available to me. So let me choose from the things that are available and hunt that. And then if the specific thing that I want to hunt is not there, then I'll go and I'll do an optional or whatever. But usually you want to do it this way. And that brings in the new investigation system. So in World, the way that things would work is you would hunt monsters and then eventually you would get investigations for those monsters with additional bonus and rewards and all that stuff. The way that it works in this game, fundamentally, every monster that is popping out into the world, you can almost consider that an investigation, except you don't have access to the investigation in your quest log yet, but you can. That is one of the mechanics. So basically the way it works is, let's say you find a monster out into the world, you just see him in the map, and you're like, oh, this one has really good rewards. You can just go and you can save that monster as an investigation. That gives you 3 uses of that quest. And then you can still go and you can kill them. So you can get like 4 uses of that quest. So naturally, whenever you see a monster that is like, oh, this one's got really good rewards, then you want to go and you want to save that. Sometimes among the rewards, you can even get things like the rubies or the gems or whatever that monster drops. You can get that as rewards. So it's very useful for you to save some of these investigations, stuff like that. Pretty good. So let's talk about the endgame. As you can imagine, low rank is going to be a fairly straightforward experience, as it is just an introduction to the game and should be viewed kind of like as a campaign tutorial. And it is a very fun campaign tutorial with a lot of really cool set pieces, a lot of really fun hunts, but at the end of the day are not really meant to be meaningfully challenged during low rank unless you are a newcomer to the series. And if you are a newcomer to the series, I would also like to warn you that there is a credit scene at the end of low rank, but the meat of the game is just after that. As you get into high rank, that is when things really ramp up. There's going to be new monsters to hunt, there's still more narrative to develop, and there's going to be a lot of things to chase. So you're going to be hunting new monsters that you haven't seen yet, you're going to be hunting harder versions of monsters that you have already seen, you're going to be doing this to be able to craft the strongest armor sets in the game. That is going to be one of your objectives. Another objective is going to be to collect some fashion, because this time around the way that things work is as you craft high rank versions of armor, you're automatically going to get those added as layered armor, and you can start mix and matching your own favorite fashion in the game. Another thing that you're going to be collecting in the end game is going to be decorations. You're not just going to be collecting them by doing quests, you're also going to be able to meld them at the melder. As Tokuda-san had already mentioned in previous interviews, you're going to be able to meld single skill decorations, so it's going to be easier for you to target some harder to get skills that maybe you never got whenever you were playing through Monster Hunter World. That is going to be something that is going to be addressed, and you're also going to be making weapons from the monsters that you are killing. But naturally, that's not all when it comes to the endgame. We're also going to be getting the return of tempered monsters. Now, this is a system that was originally introduced in Monster Hunter World, and tempered monsters consist of stronger versions of existing monsters. They're also going to give you more rewards for hunting them. In the case of tempered monsters in Wilds, those rewards are going to be multi-skill decorations and Artian parts. So multi-skill decorations, as the name implies, are decorations that include more than one skill. If you want to get single-skill decorations, you can just do regular quests, and you can also go and engage with the melding system in the game. But currently, the only way to get multi-skill decorations is to hunt tempered monsters, so naturally you want to be doing a whole lot of that. Beyond that, they also drop Artian parts, and these Artian parts are these crafting materials that you're going to be using to craft Artian weapons, which are, these endgame weapons that you're going to be chasing down and that you want to be crafting a bunch of them. I'm not really allowed to tell you a whole lot about Artian weapons, with the exception that you're going to be able to use special materials to further upgrade them. Now, beyond tempered monsters, there's also going to be frenzied monsters, but again, I can't go into too many details on those, but to be honest, I haven't really fought that many of them, so I'm not exactly sure what I could give you of additional detail. But all in all, I would consider this to be a more robust endgame than what we got in base Monster Hunter World. And while there are a decent amount of things for us to do and different avenues to chase more power, the current monster power levels just don't really require you to take advantage of every single endgame system in order to become stronger. But it's probably going to be a good idea to do so in preparation for the title updates, which I'm hoping are going to bring more challenging hunts. So I have a couple of concerns and maybe some what could be considered some pieces of feedback, which is starting things off, the different seasons, the whole Plenty, Inclemency, and Fallow, I didn't feel that they were super impactful to the hunting experience besides the visual look of the area and the monsters that spawn, because I do know that it affects monster spawns. I'm actually not sure how much I'm even allowed to say about that, because like I said, there are some very big restrictions on embargo, but yeah, they affect the monster spawns, and I think that there's some effect on monster behavior, but because this is a base game, the difficulty is not high enough where that behavior is going to make a difference, unless you happen to be more of a newcomer to the game, because I didn't notice it. Like, I would hunt things in Inclemency, I would hunt things in Fallow, and they would die just as easily in one way or the other. I never noticed too many differences. I asked Gaijin, I asked Fightin' Cowboy. They didn't notice that many differences either. The other thing is, and this actually caused me to go back and look at my reviews of Monster Hunter Rise as well as Monster Hunter Sunbreak, was the whole difficulty. Because you guys know me, I always talk about difficulty, but I wanted to look, okay, how did I feel about difficulty in the previous two Monster Hunter releases? And what I've noticed is that, yeah, I didn't find Rise too hard, I didn't find Sunbreak too hard, so at one point I'm like, maybe I did get significantly better after I did World, which World I would say was probably the one where I felt difficulty, because before that I had played Monster Hunter, but I wasn't like, super grinding, creating content, doing all these things. World was the point at which I really focused a lot more on Monster Hunter, despite the fact that I obviously started in friggin' Freedom Unite back in the day. And World is where I started really developing muscle memory and doing all of these things, and I just feel like probably since then I've only felt difficulty in actual endgame of like master ranks and stuff like that. So I didn't feel like the game was too hard. I will, however, say, like I said earlier, I did get my wish, I did card in low rank, and I really appreciated the fact that I carded in low rank. That made me very, very happy. Now, one of the things that I will bring up when it comes to difficulty is that the Palico this time around is absolutely busted. Palico is so strong, in fact, that I'm considering for my stream playthrough not taking the Palico. Now, I know that when I say something like this, people are going to start like, so Palico not intended. Not what I'm saying at all. Do not take my words out of context, okay? It's just, I want to be more challenged. I haven't made up my mind yet on whether or not I'm going to be using Palico, but I think that you should use Palico. Don't turn this into a discussion like friggin' Elden Ring and using spirit summons. Please, let's not go down that road again, okay? Palico's in the game, you should use it. I used it throughout my whole first playthrough. I think that for the second one, I want things to be a little bit harder, so I might keep him at base. But the reason why I say that he's so powerful is because oftentimes he will heal you like so fast that you will barely have time to drink a potion. He gets like a ton of tools available to him. I don't know how many of them I'm even allowed to talk about again because of embargo restrictions, but he is very, very, very powerful in the stuff that he ends up doing in the game, and super, super useful. So I think it's going to be very good, particularly for new players, to have a palico that is that useful. But if you are a veteran and you're just like, oh man, this feels so easy, try going at it without the palico. I think you will have a different experience. Now, another thing that I want to bring up is Sacred. And the reason I want to bring up Sacred is not even necessarily because of the... I know that probably a lot of people will bring this up, which is the usefulness of using Sacred to pick you back up off the ground after you've been knocked down, which is super useful and super powerful. I think I rarely use that. It was just like it didn't even cross my mind. Most of the time, I'm just going off of muscle memory, and I'm just like, oh, let me get back up. Let me, I wouldn't think to call Sacred. I usually call Sacred when it's to move me around. And on some situations, I did call Sacred to sharpen my weapon. And yeah, it is what it is. But beyond that, one of the things that I noticed about Sacred is that I feel like I barely know the layouts of any of the maps. This might be a me thing, but what ends up happening is just, oh, monster moved away, call Sacred. That also makes it so that I actually don't know how to navigate these maps without Sacred. It takes Sacred away from me. I don't know where to go. And that is only exacerbated due to the fact that there are some nooks and crannies that only Sacred can get through. So like those, if you're talking about the Windward Plains, like those places on those rocks up top where Sacred goes, only Sacred can go there. Like you can't reach there as a hunter. So navigating the maps requires Sacred in a lot of instances. And I feel like that made me, in a way, less aware of the layouts. But that could just be a me thing, but it's a little bit weird for me to kind of like balance that out with what I expected from other maps. So like, you put me in a map for Rise and Sunbreak, and I'm going to be web slinging all over the place with wire bugs, and I know exactly where I'm going. I know exactly where everything is because I had to learn that. And even if you were riding around the Palamute doesn't just ferry you to the monster. So you have to learn the routes and the stuff that you're doing. And with Sacred just being so absolutely convenient, it's kind of like in between you fighting the monster, whenever the monster moves away, you're just like, yep, Sacred, let's go, take me there. And Sacred takes you exactly where the monster is every time, super fast, super efficient, to the point where I barely engaged with the pop-up camp system, right? You have the pop-up camp system where you're placing down these camps and all of these things, and there's not really much of a reason to do that because I can just go straight from base camp, get on Sacred. Sacred will get me to the monster so fast that I think the time that it would take me to like, oh, let me teleport to a camp that's close. It's like, no, just press up D-pad. Sacred will zoom you right there so fast, doesn't even matter. So I'm not saying this as like a bad thing. I'm just saying this as something that I consider to be food for thought. Like, is this something that we want? I don't know. I'm still conflicted on it. And I'm not again, people will take what I'm saying and they'll be like, oh, Rurikhan hates Sacred. It's like, no, that's not the case. I'm just thinking about things, right? But that's because I'm a big boomer and whatever. Now, the other things is obviously going to have to be focus mode and the whole thing. I made a whole video of feedback about focus mode during the beta, and specifically the fact that we're still in that situation where if you go to the Greatsword and you start charging and you hold down focus mode, you can move the camera with the left stick. Makes sense because, your finger is going to be on the faceplate button, so you can't have your thumb touch on the camera stick. It just makes sense. You can move the stick with the left. And I think it sucks that they didn't add that functionality to a lot of the other weapons. So if I'm on the gun lance and I'm doing my combo, and my character can't move because I'm stuck in place doing like brah brah. Why can't I turn my camera with the left stick? There's no reason. And there are other weapons. There's a ton of other weapons. Like I made a whole video dedicated to this. You guys can go check that out. My feedback on focus and all that stuff. I'm really surprised that it made it into the game in this state. It's not a bad thing, but why? Why can't every weapon get the same functionality as the Greatsword? Now, I know that some people will say, well, some inputs, some weapons have directional inputs. Yeah, I agree. And in those, yeah, you can't move the camera. Yeah, makes sense. Makes perfect sense. But there's a ton of things that don't require directional input because you are locked in place while you're doing it. And I don't see a reason why I shouldn't be allowed to change the camera, especially because you can do it if you're playing mouse and keyboard. Hell, I can do it if I have paddles on the back of my controller. And speaking of that, obviously the other complaint is still the NSEC controls, which are still the same. They didn't change it. They said that they weren't going to change them, so I wasn't expecting it. But, you know, in the review, as a part of the review, that is something that I have to bring up. I think it sucks that people that made the NSEC basically to really get a good experience with the weapon, the best way to do it is with paddles on the back of your controller because, you know, you're not going to be charging B and doing Y combos and at the same time turning your camera. It's just not going to happen. So, you know, I know that some players do it and they do like crazy claw things. It's just like, look, not everybody wants to do crazy claw things on their controller, especially when this is clearly a problem in the control scheme. At least that's my opinion. I know that some people disagree with me. It is what it is. Another thing, no canteen. I've already brought that up. I miss the canteen a lot. In the place where the canteen would be, there's a dude there that just gives you rations from time to time. So you go up to him and he's like, oh, here's some rations. And he just keeps giving you rations, which you can then use to cook. But I miss the cantina experience, having like the cutscene of the palicos preparing food for you and all that stuff. Oh, I always like that kind of stuff. Now, it's not like that stuff is gone. That is replaced with something which is the meals that some of the villages will prepare for you. So as you unlock locales throughout the game and all of that stuff, and you do quests for the different villagers and the different places that you go to, eventually some of those villagers will invite you for a meal. And then you go there, you get a cutscene, kind of like the one that you guys will have seen even in the benchmark tool. There's a cutscene where they're like breaking bread and spreading cheese on it and all of that stuff. There's a cutscene like that for the different places that you go to. And all of those cutscenes are different. And from time to time, they just invite you, hey, come have a meal with us. And you'll see that marked on your map. There'll be like a well-done steak symbol on your map, and you go there, and then you talk to an NPC, and the NPC's like, oh, we wanted to offer you a meal, and then you go get that cutscene. So there is that, and those usually give you better buffs and all of that stuff, but those aren't available always. So you will be cycling through doing some of those, and then sometimes you go into your tent and cook, and then sometimes you might just BBQ out in the open. It's however you want to do it, but at the end of the day, I still miss the canteen, very much like I miss another thing that is very near and dear to my heart, which is the Gathering Hub. There is no Gathering Hub. It's like, oh, I really wanted the Gathering Hub. This, again, is one of those things that I know that not all players want that. I'm just giving guys my opinions on it. I wish there was a Gathering Hub, but there isn't one. The world is the Gathering Hub, essentially, I think, is the way that the team is looking at it. Because you can form a link party, then you can form an environment party, and everybody just gets together in the same place, and you go hunting monsters and having a good time, and you're just all together in the same place, and that's what it is. But I still miss having that, you know, it's your little clubhouse where you hang out with everybody, and everybody's in the Gathering Hub. I didn't like the fact that they didn't have one for Sunbreak, and I definitely miss having a Gathering Hub here as well. The arena experience is also different from what you expect. I'm not sure how, again, because of the embargo restrictions, I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to talk about the arena, but it's not a big deal. It's just like quests as you remember them, like arena as you remember it, fundamentally different. At least the version of the game that I played. Who knows if that is something that is getting updated or not. As a final conclusion, the key words that I would say for Monster Hunter Wilds are immersion and flow. It's all about immersing you into the world, experiencing the ecology if that's something that you're into, hunting monsters in their natural habitat, and just flowing through quests with as little attrition as possible without having to worry about, oh, I gotta go eat the thing, gotta go do the thing, gotta go do this, gotta go do that. It's like, no, just flow, just do it. Campaign is very different, like I've already mentioned. It's just, it bears repeating because I think that for a lot of people in the beginning, it's even going to feel a little bit alienating because I felt that way as I was going through the campaign. I was like, I don't know, this feels so different. It's kind of weird. But after a while, after you get used to it, I ended up liking it. I like it a lot, personally. Hunting action, still awesome. Personally, I can't wait to do my real save on stream. And in terms of whether or not would I recommend the game, absolutely. It's super easy recommendation, so long as your rig can run it. So if you're playing like on a PlayStation, if the performance is like what I experienced at the preview event, I think it's easy recommendation. And if you're playing on PC, make sure to run the benchmark tool because I've already seen mileage varies wildly depending on everybody's PCs and all of that stuff. But if your rig can run it at a decent frame rate, yeah, super easy recommendation. I think you're going to have an absolute blast with it. I'm going to be streaming the whole thing here in the channel, so make sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, all of that jazz. And for now, that is going to be it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. See you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.